The first thing people noticed about Caleb Turner wasn't his age. It was the hole. It started as a shallow cut in the side of the low hill behind his cabin, just a rough scar in the prairie grass. Most folks assumed it was another boyish project, maybe a root cellar, maybe a place to hide from chores. But week after week, the hole grew deeper, wider, longer, until it became impossible to ignore. By late September, you could see it clearly from the dirt road, a sloping tunnel carved straight into the hill, reinforced with stacked stones and crooked boards salvaged from old fencing. It looked less like a cellar and more like the beginning of a cave. "Turner boy's lost his mind," someone muttered outside Miller's feed store. "Kid's digging his own grave," another joked. Caleb heard the comments, even when people didn't say them to his face. In a town small enough that news traveled faster than the wind, nothing stayed secret for long. Every shovel of dirt he hauled out of the hillside became another story told over coffee or whiskey. But Caleb kept digging. He was 15 years old and already looked older than that. Thin, weather-worn, with a face shaped by long days in sun and cold. His hands were blistered and permanently dusted with dirt. His boots were too big, inherited from his father, and his coat had been patched so many times it barely resembled its original shape. The land he worked wasn't much. 40 acres of high prairie, a sagging cabin, and 3 horses that were more bone than muscle. It was all that remained of his father's ranch, all that remained of his family. Caleb didn't build fences the way other ranchers did. He didn't mend the roof on the barn because there was no barn left to mend. He didn't ride into town unless he had to. Every spare moment went into the hill. People wondered why. Some thought he was just lonely. Some thought he was scared of winter. A few said he was touched in the head. None of them knew what he remembered. Last winter had been the worst one anyone could recall. Wind so sharp it felt like it cut through skin. Snow that came sideways and buried fences until the prairie looked smooth as a white ocean. Caleb's father had tried to hold the ranch together through it. He'd built a small wooden shelter for the horses, a lean-to of rough planks and tar paper. He'd said it would be enough. "It's just cold," his father told him. "Horses can handle cold." They hadn't handled the wind. Caleb could still hear it when he closed his eyes, the shrieking howl of the storm tearing at the boards, forcing its way through every crack and seam. The horses had pressed together inside the shelter, trembling, their breath steaming in the dark. By morning, 2 of them were dead. His father had found them first. He dropped to his knees in the snow, his shoulders sagging like something inside him had finally broken. He tried to save the last one, dragging it into the cabin, wrapping it in blankets. But a man can't outfight winter forever. 3 days later, the horse was gone. A week after that, his father was buried on the hill where Caleb now dug. The town said it was pneumonia. The doctor said exhaustion and exposure. Caleb didn't argue. He just knew what he'd seen. Animals freezing behind wooden walls that looked solid until the wind found every weakness. That was when he started watching the hills instead of the buildings. There were wild horses farther out on the range, strays and half-feral herds that didn't belong to anyone. Caleb had seen them disappear into shallow ravines and rocky folds in the land when storms rolled in. He'd seen them come out afterward, thin, shaken, but alive. They didn't fight the wind, they hid from it. So when the summer ended and the nights began to turn bitter again, Caleb picked up his shovel and went to work. He chose the hill because it faced south, sloping gently toward the sun and away from the worst of the northern wind. The soil there was packed with clay and gravel, hard to dig, but strong enough to hold its shape. Every morning he fed the horses first, then he dug. He dug until his arms burned and his back screamed. He hauled dirt in a rusted wheelbarrow and dumped it behind the cabin. He lined the walls with stones he carried in from the field, one by one. At school, the other boys whispered, "Caleb's building a cave. What's he going to live in there like a mole?" One of them asked him straight out during lunch, "Why don't you just build a barn like normal people?" Caleb shrugged and went back to his bread and beans. He didn't want to explain. Explaining meant admitting what he was afraid of, and fear in a place like this was something you kept quiet. By mid-October, the hole had turned into a slanted passage wide enough for a horse to walk through. Caleb had carved out a chamber at the end of it, long and low, just tall enough for the animals to stand without hitting their heads. Inside, the air felt different, not warm exactly, but not biting cold either. The earth held its own kind of steady breath, a slow, patient warmth that didn't vanish when the sun went down. He tested it with his hand, pressing his palm against the wall. Solid, calm, quiet. One afternoon, Mr. Harris rode up on his bay mare and leaned on the fence to watch. "You planning to live underground now?" he asked. Caleb wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "It's for the horses." Mr. Harris squinted at the opening. "Horses need air. They need light. They need shelter," Caleb said. "They've got hair," the man replied. "That's what hair's for." Caleb looked past him at the sky. Thin clouds were already moving fast, racing each other toward winter. "Hair doesn't stop the wind," he said. Mr. Harris shook his head and rode off, already turning the story into something funny for town. That night, Caleb sat on the cabin steps with a lantern beside him. The prairie stretched out in silence, broken only by the slow chewing of the horses in the corral. He felt small out there, a boy with too much land and not enough time, a boy trying to outthink something that had already taken his father. What if they were right? What if the hole collapsed? What if the horses panicked? What if he'd spent months digging only to watch them die anyway? The question sat heavy in his chest, but so did the memory of frozen breath and stiff legs and a man kneeling in the snow. Caleb stood up and walked back to the hill. Inside the dark chamber, he hung the lantern on a nail and looked around. It wasn't finished yet. The walls were uneven. The ceiling was still bare earth in places. But it was quiet. And for the first time since last winter, quiet felt like hope. Outside, the wind began to rise. And Caleb Turner kept building something the rest of the town believed was a mistake. Caleb learned early that memory had its own weather. Some mornings it came like fog, thin, quiet, drifting through his thoughts while he worked. Other days it hit like a storm, loud and sudden, carrying him back to the winter that changed everything. He tried not to think about that winter. But the deeper he dug into the hill, the more the past seemed to rise with every shovelful of dirt. The night his father died, the wind had never stopped screaming. It had rushed across the prairie like something alive, slamming into the cabin walls, finding every weak board and every loose nail. Snow had piled up against the door so high Caleb had to shove it open with his shoulder. His father lay on the narrow bed by the stove, his breath shallow and uneven. The room smelled of wet wool and smoke. "He'll be all right," his father had whispered. "The horses. Check the horses." Caleb had run back outside with a lantern. The lean-to shelter was half buried in snow. The boards rattled like teeth in the wind. One horse still stood. The others were already down. He remembered touching their necks and feeling the cold through their skin, as if winter had reached inside them. After that, time lost its shape. Neighbors came. The doctor came. The horses were dragged away and buried. His father faded in and out of sleep until one morning he didn't wake up at all. People told Caleb he was strong. They told him his father would be proud. They told him winter would pass. None of them told him how to forget the sound of the wind. That sound followed him into the present as he worked on the underground stable. It whistled over the hilltop and slid down the slope toward the entrance he was carving. But inside the tunnel it softened. It lost its teeth. That difference mattered to him more than anyone could understand. By the time October rolled around, the chamber inside the hill was big enough to stand in without hunching his shoulders. The walls were rough stone and packed earth. The floor was still dirt, but he planned to cover it with straw before bringing the horses in. What he worried about most was air. He wasn't stupid. He knew animals couldn't live without breathing. A hole in the ground could turn into a trap just as easily as it could turn into shelter. So he started building a narrow shaft from the back of the chamber upward, angling it toward the top of the hill. He used scrap lumber to brace it and left a small opening at the top, hidden between rocks. Warm air would rise, cold air would fall. That was the idea anyway. One afternoon, while he was fitting boards around the shaft, Mrs. Doyle came walking up the road with a basket on her arm. She had been bringing him bread and eggs ever since his father's funeral. "You're still at it," she said, peering into the tunnel. "Almost done," Caleb replied. She hesitated. "You know people are talking. They were talking before." "They're worried," she said gently. "You're just a boy. Winter out here, it isn't something you experiment with." Caleb wiped his hands on his pants. "I'm not experimenting." She raised an eyebrow. "What are you doing then?" "I'm remembering," he said before he could stop himself. Mrs. Doyle looked at him for a long moment. "Remembering what?" "The horses that died," he said. "They didn't die because it was cold. They died because the wind never stopped touching them." She sighed. "Wind's part of winter, Caleb." "Not underground," he said. She didn't argue after that. She just set the basket down and squeezed his shoulder before leaving. As the days grew shorter, Caleb worked faster. His movements became deliberate and focused, as if the hill itself were counting down. At night he lay awake listening to the wind brush against the cabin walls. Sometimes he dreamed of his father standing in the doorway, coat covered in snow, saying nothing at all. Other times he dreamed of the horses, warm and breathing, standing in the earth like they belonged there. By the first week of November, the tunnel was ready. The entrance sloped gently downward, wide enough for a horse to walk through without fear of slipping. The chamber was long and low, carved into the hill like a hidden room. The ventilation shaft let in a thin column of pale light during the day. It smelled like dirt and stone and new wood. Caleb stood inside and tried to imagine the winter. He brought the horses down one at a time. They didn't like it at first. The oldest mare, Rusty, stopped at the entrance and planted her hooves like they were nailed to the ground. Caleb tugged on the rope and whispered to her the way his father used to. "It's all right, easy now." She snorted, eyes wide, but finally took one step forward, then another. The other two followed, nervous and uncertain. Their hooves made hollow sounds against the packed earth. Inside they shifted and stamped, breathing hard. The walls made their movements echo. Caleb stayed with them for hours that first night, sitting on an upturned crate with a blanket around his shoulders. He brushed their coats, talked to them, fed them handfuls of hay. Slowly their fear softened. The next morning frost covered the prairie. The pond had skinned over with ice. The wind sliced across the open land without mercy. Inside the hill, the air felt steady, not warm like a stove, but not cruel either. Mr. Harris rode by again and stopped to look. "You really put them in there," he said. "Just at night," Caleb replied, "when the wind's bad." "You're asking for trouble?" Caleb didn't answer. The first storm came a week later. It wasn't a blizzard, not yet. Just heavy snow and sharp wind that pushed against the cabin and bent the grass flat. Caleb brought the horses down before dark and shut himself in with them. He could hear the storm moving over the hill, could feel the faint tremble of it in the ground, but it didn't reach them the same way. The horses ate, they shifted, they slept. When morning came, the prairie outside was white and wild. Fences had vanished. Drifts lay piled against the cabin door. But inside the hill, the chamber looked exactly the same as it had the night before. That was when Caleb realized something had changed. Not the weather, him. For the first time since his father died, he felt like he wasn't waiting for winter to take something else. He felt like he was standing in its way. Still, doubt crept in at night. What if this only worked for small storms? What if the real cold came? What if he'd misunderstood what he saw with the wild horses? Sometimes he imagined the town laughing after the first real freeze. He imagined opening the tunnel and finding his animals stiff and still. Those thoughts made his chest tighten until he had to go back inside the chamber and feel the earth walls with his hands. They were cool, solid, patient. Winter came in pieces after that, a hard freeze, then snow, then wind again. Each time Caleb brought the horses underground. Each time they came out alive. People noticed, not loudly, not at first. But Mr. Harris didn't laugh anymore when he rode by. Mrs. Doyle started asking how cold it felt inside. Even the boys at school stopped calling it a cave and started calling it the tunnel. Caleb didn't tell anyone what he was afraid of. He didn't say that every quiet night felt like borrowed time. He didn't say that the sky had begun to look heavy in a way he recognized. He had seen that look once before, in the winter that took his father. And he knew, deep in his bones, that the wind was only warming up. The real storm was still on its way. By mid-December, winter had settled in for good. The prairie no longer looked like land so much as something erased. Fences disappeared under drifts. The dirt road faded into a pale line that only locals could read. Smoke from chimneys rose straight up in the still air, thin and fragile against the wide sky. Caleb's days fell into a strict rhythm. Morning, shovel a path from the cabin to the hill. Midday, check the ventilation shaft, clear the opening of snow. Evening, lead the horses down the sloping tunnel before the wind sharpened. It wasn't just work, it was ritual. Each time he tied the rope to Rusty's halter and guided her into the earth, he felt like he was repeating a promise. You're not going to die the way the others did. The horses had learned their routine too. They no longer balked at the entrance. They walked down with cautious but steady steps, hooves echoing softly along the packed dirt. Inside, the chamber smelled of hay and warm breath. Condensation darkened the stone walls. The air moved gently, drawn upward through the shaft like a slow sigh. Caleb kept an old thermometer nailed to a beam. He checked it every night. Outside 10 below, inside 35. It wasn't comfort, it was survival. Word spread quietly at first. Mrs. Doyle mentioned it while buying flour. Mr. Harris muttered something about that tunnel of his at the post office. Two ranchers rode past one afternoon and slowed their horses to look. Caleb felt their eyes even when they didn't speak. One cold evening, just as he was closing the cabin door, a wagon pulled up. Three men climbed down, stamping their boots. "Evening, Caleb," said Tom Wheeler, who owned the largest herd east of town. "What brings you out?" Caleb asked. Wheeler nodded toward the hill. "We heard you're keeping your horses underground." Caleb hesitated. "Just when the wind's bad." Wheeler glanced at the others. "Mind showing us?" Caleb led them to the entrance. The men leaned forward, peering into the dim passage like it was a mouth. "Looks like a mine," one said. "Looks like a mistake," another muttered. Caleb picked up the lantern and walked inside. They followed, ducking their heads. The horses shifted at the unfamiliar voices. Rusty snorted. "Smells warmer in here," Wheeler admitted. Caleb pointed to the shaft. "Air goes out there. Cold stays out here." One man ran his hand along the stone wall. "Feels solid. Feels like a graver," the other replied. They didn't stay long. They left with polite nods and doubtful faces. But they came. That was new. The town didn't laugh the way it had in October. It watched. Caleb began to feel it everywhere. In the way people paused when he entered a room. In the way questions came wrapped in casual words. "How are the horses holding up?" "Cold enough for you yet? Tunnel still standing?" He answered simply. He didn't boast. At night, though, fear returned, because winter still felt unfinished. One evening, while he brushed Rusty's coat, the wind rose suddenly. It wasn't loud at first. It came in low and steady, like something breathing. The horses shifted uneasily. Caleb stood still and listened. The sound outside wasn't like the earlier storms. It had weight to it, a pressure that made the cabin boards creak. He remembered that sound. He remembered how it had grown. By morning, the storm had buried the road again. The wind kept driving snow against the hill until the entrance was nearly hidden. Caleb dug it out with numb hands, clearing the shaft too. Inside, the chamber stayed steady. But he didn't relax. He knew this kind of storm. It was the kind that tested things. That afternoon, Mr. Harris arrived on foot, scarf wrapped tight around his face. "Wheeler lost 2 horses last night," he said without greeting. "Froze in his north barn." Caleb swallowed. "I'm sorry." Mr. Harris nodded toward the hill. "Yours?" "All alive." The man was quiet for a moment. "Mind if I look again?" They stood inside the chamber. The horses breathed softly. Straw rustled under their hooves. Mr. Harris took off his glove and held his hand in the air. "Feels calmer." Caleb didn't say anything. When the man left, he paused at the entrance. "Boy," he said, "you might be on to something." Caleb didn't feel proud. He felt afraid, because being on to something meant something bigger was coming. The sky darkened over the next days in a way that had nothing to do with clouds. It felt heavy, like the land itself was holding its breath. The wind came and went. Snow fell in short bursts. People started moving their animals closer to buildings. Doors were nailed tighter. Extra hay was stacked inside barns. Caleb doubled his work. He packed more straw into the chamber. He sealed small gaps with mud and cloth. He checked the shaft every morning and night. Sometimes he slept in the tunnel, wrapped in a blanket beside the horses, listening to their breathing. He dreamed of white emptiness and his father's voice calling his name. The town gathered one evening at the general store when the telegraph line finally came back to life. A storm was moving down from the north, not a usual one. A deep one. Temperatures falling fast. Wind predicted to last days. The men spoke in low voices. Someone mentioned the winter years ago when cattle froze standing up. Caleb stood in the doorway and felt the weight of it settle on his chest. On the walk home, he noticed how the sky looked wrong. Too flat, too pale. He led the horses underground before dark and stayed with them. By midnight, the wind began. It hit the cabin like a living thing. Boards rattled. Snow hissed against the walls. The sound rolled over the hilltop and pressed down on the earth above him. Inside the chamber, dust fell from the ceiling beams. The horses shifted, uneasy. Caleb moved among them, hand on each neck, murmuring soft words he barely heard himself. The lantern light trembled. He thought of the barns in town, tall, stiff, full of gaps. He thought of his father standing in the snow, shouting into the wind. The storm grew stronger. Hours passed without shape. The shaft hummed faintly, drawing warm breath upward. Cold air crept in low and thin, but never took over. Caleb sat with his back against the wall, eyes open. For the first time, he truly understood what he had built. Not a hole, a shield. Above him, winter tried to break the world. Below it, a 15-year-old boy waited with 3 horses and the quiet hope that earth would hold. And as the wind climbed toward a roar, Caleb knew, deep inside, that whatever came next would decide everything. The storm did not arrive all at once. It built itself slowly, like something gathering strength. By the time dawn should have come, the world outside the hill was nothing but sound. Wind tearing across the prairie, snow grinding against wood, the deep groan of pressure pushing against the land. Caleb could feel it through the earth, a low vibration in the walls as if the hill itself were bracing. Inside the chamber, the lantern burned low. Its flame bent whenever the wind changed direction above them. The horses stood close together. Rusty kept her head near Caleb's shoulder, her warm breath fogging the air. Caleb had not slept. He counted time by the horses' movements, by when they drank, when they shifted, when they sighed and settled again. His body ached from sitting on cold ground, but he didn't dare lie down fully. Not yet. He kept listening for changes, for cracks, for collapse. The ventilation shaft whispered softly, pulling warm air upward. He had built it just wide enough to breathe, just narrow enough to keep the worst of the cold from rushing in. Still, fear crept in like damp. What if snow sealed the opening? What if the pressure crushed the roof? What if the wind found a weakness? Every doubt came with the sound of his father's voice in memory. Horses can handle cold. Caleb pressed his palm against the stone wall. Cold, solid, patient. The storm reached full force by midday. He knew because the sound changed. It stopped rushing and started pounding. Snow didn't fall anymore, it slammed. Wind didn't move, it struck. Above him, something cracked. A long, dry snap like a tree breaking under weight. One of the horses reared back suddenly, eyes rolling white. "Easy," Caleb said, though his own heart was racing. "Easy now." He moved slowly, carefully, laying his hand against each animal's neck. Their muscles trembled under his touch. They trusted him. That thought steadied him more than anything else. He fed them in small portions to keep them calm. He rationed water from the barrel he had dragged down earlier. He chewed on a piece of hard bread and didn't feel hungry at all. Time stretched. The storm did not weaken that first night. By the second morning, if it was morning at all, snow had drifted so high that the light from the shaft dimmed into a pale blur. The air smelled of damp hay and warm breath and clay. Caleb tried to dig his way out once. He climbed the tunnel slowly, pushing upward into packed snow. The shovel hit resistance almost immediately. The wind roared so loudly that it felt like standing beside a waterfall made of ice. He managed only a few feet before the cold forced him back. The world above was closed, so he stayed below. He talked to the horses to keep himself from thinking too much. "Soon," he said, "soon it'll pass." But the wind didn't listen. By the second night, his hands were numb, even inside his gloves. His thoughts blurred with exhaustion. He dreamed sitting up, eyes half open. In his dreams, he saw the town buried. He saw barns bent inward like broken ribs. He saw his father standing on the hill, snow blowing through him like smoke. When he woke, Rusty was nudging him gently with her nose. The horses were restless. Something in them sensed what he could not see. Caleb crawled to the thermometer nailed to the beam and held the lantern close. 32. Colder than before, but still far from deadly. He exhaled slowly. They were holding. Above them, the storm finally began to weaken on the third day. Not suddenly. It didn't leave in a rush. It loosened its grip a little at a time, like a hand slowly unclenching. The pounding softened into a howl. The howl sank into a long, tired moan. Then at last, silence fell so suddenly it hurt his ears. Caleb didn't move at first. Silence in winter could mean danger too. He waited. When nothing came, he took the shovel and began digging upward again. This time the snow gave way. He pushed and climbed and broke through into white daylight. The prairie had vanished. Fences were gone. The road was only a faint shadow. Drifts rose like frozen waves against the cabin and the hill. The air burned his lungs. He stood there for a long moment, stunned by how empty it looked. Then he remembered the town. He dug a path to the cabin door. The porch was buried to the roofline. One window was cracked from the pressure of ice. He ate a handful of dried beans and drank melted snow, then started digging toward the road. It took him hours. Every step felt like walking through water. When he reached the edge of the main road, he could see dark shapes scattered across the fields. Horses, not moving. He swallowed hard and kept going. By afternoon, he reached the first ranch. The barn roof had collapsed inward. Boards stuck up at odd angles like broken bones. Two horses lay half buried in snow near the door. A man stood nearby, hands hanging useless at his sides. Caleb recognized him as Tom Wheeler. "They froze," Wheeler said dully. "Couldn't get them out. Doors ice shut." Caleb didn't know what to say. More ranches came into view as he walked. More damage. More still shapes. By the time he turned back toward home, his legs were shaking. When he reached the hill, the tunnel mouth was still there, buried but intact. He dug it open and led the horses out one by one. They stepped into sunlight slowly, blinking. Rusty shook herself and snorted, sending powdery snow into the air. All three stood on solid legs. Alive, Caleb sank to his knees. He pressed his forehead into the snow and felt tears freeze on his cheeks before they could fall. It wasn't joy. It was relief so heavy it hurt. Word spread before he could stop it. Someone saw the horses. Someone told someone else. By evening, people were walking through the drifts toward his hill. They came quiet. They came with faces that had lost something. Mr. Harris arrived first. He stared at the horses, then at the tunnel, then back at Caleb. "They're all right." Caleb nodded. Mr. Harris removed his hat. Behind him came Mrs. Doyle, wrapped in two shawls, then others. They looked at the tunnel the way people look at graves that did not take the dead. "You stayed in there?" someone asked. "All 3 days," Caleb said. One man shook his head. "We lost 17. Another said nothing at all. Caleb didn't feel proud. He felt tired and older than 15. That night, the hill was no longer just a hill. It was proof, not that he was clever, but that the wind could be beaten, and that the earth, quiet, steady, and patient, had kept a promise he made to himself when winter took his father. The town didn't laugh anymore. It stood and stared at what a boy had built. And for the first time since the storm began, Caleb felt something close to warmth, not from the ground, but from the way people finally looked at him, not as a child, not as a fool, but as someone who had understood winter when the rest of them had not. The storm had passed, but winter hadn't let go. For days after the blizzard, the prairie stayed locked in white silence. Smoke barely rose from chimneys. Wagons didn't move. People traveled on foot or not at all. What moved instead were stories. They traveled faster than any horse could. By the second morning after the storm, everyone knew that Caleb Turner's horses had walked out of the hill alive. Not mostly alive and not barely made it, alive. 3 animals where others had lost 10, 15, sometimes more. Caleb didn't go looking for attention. He spent his mornings shoveling paths, checking on the horses, and helping Mrs. Doyle carry water from her half-frozen pump. But attention came anyway. Men arrived with frost still on their coats, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. "You really stayed underground?" one asked. "For 3 days," Caleb said. "And they didn't panic?" "They did at first, then they trusted the place." Another man frowned. "It was warmer?" "Not warm," Caleb answered. "Just steady." They nodded slowly, like men hearing something that made sense too late. By afternoon, Tom Wheeler came back. This time, he didn't bring jokes. He brought a notebook. "Show me," he said. "Not just the hole, the thinking." Caleb hesitated. He wasn't used to explaining himself. But he led them into the tunnel. The chamber smelled of hay and damp earth. Sunlight filtered faintly down the shaft. Wheeler knelt and touched the wall. "Earth holds heat." Caleb nodded. "And blocks wind." Another rancher asked, "What about air?" Caleb pointed up. "Shaft. Warm breath rises. Cold stays low." They stood quietly, listening to the slow movement of air. No one laughed. That was the strangest part. For the first time since he started digging, the hill felt less like a secret and more like a lesson. The next day, 2 more ranchers came. Then 4. By the end of the week, people were walking from miles away to see the tunnel. They asked about slope, about stone, about roof beams. Caleb showed them the mistakes too. The places where he had dug too steeply, the section where water once pooled until he cut a shallow drain. "I almost quit here," he admitted, pointing to a cracked wall he'd reinforced with timber. That honesty seemed to matter more than the design. Mr. Harris, who once called it a grave, stood inside with his hat off. "I lost 8, he said quietly, "all in my north barn." Caleb swallowed. "I'm sorry." Mr. Harris shook his head. "You were right about the wind. I just didn't want to hear it from a boy." Caleb didn't know how to answer that. The town changed in small ways. Boards were taken off ruined barns and carried toward hillsides. Picks and shovels appeared in yards where hay had been stacked only weeks before. People stopped asking if it could work. They started asking how long it would take. Caleb's hands grew sore again, but this time it was from pointing and measuring instead of digging. He showed them how to choose the slope that faced away from the worst wind, how to make the floor tilt just enough to drain, how to leave space between beams so the weight of earth would spread instead of crush. "You don't fight winter," he told them. "You step out of its way." At night, he still slept lightly. The storm had passed, but something else had begun. Responsibility. When people came to him now, they came with loss in their voices. "My best mare didn't make it." We lost nearly all the foals. I don't want that again. Caleb felt each sentence like a stone added to his chest. One evening, as he sat on the cabin steps, Mrs. Doyle joined him. They look at you different, she said. He nodded. I don't feel different. She smiled sadly. That's how it usually is. The hardest moment came a week later, when a man named Edward Boone arrived. Boone owned the biggest barn west of town. It had been new, expensive. It was now a twisted skeleton half buried in snow. I mocked you, Boone said, standing stiffly at the tunnel entrance. Said you were wasting your time? Caleb remembered him. I lost 32 horses, Boone continued. I don't need pride anymore. I need answers. Caleb looked at him, then stepped aside. Come in. Inside the chamber, Boone stood very still. I thought walls meant safety, he said. Turns out walls just gave the wind something to push against. Caleb didn't say it, but they both knew. The ground had no sides for the wind to grab. Boone's voice broke. Will you help me build one? Caleb hesitated. Not because he didn't want to, because he didn't know if he could. I'm not a builder, he said. I just tried something. Boone met his eyes. That's what builders are. They began the next morning. Not just Boone. 3 others joined. The work was slow. The ground was still hard. Frost bit at their fingers. But there was something new in it. No laughter, no mocking, only the sound of tools and breath. People brought coffee. Someone brought bread. Caleb showed them how to cut the first slope into the hillside. He stood back and watched as men twice his age copied the shape he had made alone months before. It felt unreal. He remembered standing in the same cold, being told he was foolish. Now those same voices asked, is this angle right? Winter lingered, but it no longer felt like an enemy that owned everything. It felt like a test people had finally studied for. One night, Caleb dreamed of his father again. This time, his father wasn't standing in snow. He stood inside the tunnel, touching the wall. You learn, he said. When Caleb woke, the dream stayed with him. By early February, 3 underground shelters were already taking shape across the hills. Not finished, not perfect, but real. When the wind rose again, those ranchers led their animals down into the earth, just as Caleb had. No one laughed. They listened to the wind pass over their heads and felt something hold. Caleb still didn't think of himself as important. He thought of himself as careful. But the town had begun to see him as something else. Not a child who dug a hole, but a boy who had paid attention when Winter spoke. And that made all the difference. By late February, the hills around town no longer looked empty. Dark cuts had appeared along their sides, fresh scars in the snow where people had begun digging into the earth. They weren't neat. They weren't pretty. Some sloped too sharply. Some were too shallow. But they all shared one thing. They turned away from the wind. Caleb rode from place to place on Rusty, stopping wherever someone waved him down. Is this deep enough? Should the roof be thicker? Where do we put the air hole? He answered as best he could. Not like a teacher, like someone who had made mistakes and survived them. Give it room to breathe. Let the ground do the work. Don't fight the cold, hide from it. What surprised him most was how quickly the town changed. Men who used to argue about fences now argued about slopes. Women who used to complain about leaky roofs now carried soup to digging sites. Kids who once laughed about the tunnel now ran messages between hills. Winter was still there. The wind still came. But something had shifted. People weren't waiting for it anymore. They were preparing. One night, a smaller storm rolled in. Nothing like the blizzard, but sharp enough to test the new shelters. Snow fell sideways again. The wind rattled doors and bent trees. Caleb lay awake in his cabin listening. By morning, he rode out to check. Boone's horses stood inside their half-finished earth shelter, steam rising gently from their backs. They were restless but alive. At Wheeler's place, cattle crowded into a shallow dugout, their breath warming the walls. At Mr. Harris's ranch, 2 horses that would have stood in an open barn were tucked into a slope of dirt and timber. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The town noticed. They began speaking about the blizzard the way people speak about wars. Before and after. Before, winter was something you endured. After, winter was something you learned from. Caleb felt proud sometimes. Then he felt scared of that pride, because people were listening to him now, and listening meant trusting. That weight settled on him slowly. One afternoon, a stranger arrived on a gray horse. His coat was thick and worn, his eyes sharp from long miles. I heard about the boy who put horses underground, he said. Caleb frowned. Who told you? Everybody between here and Cedar Ridge. The man introduced himself as Thomas Reed from the valley north of them. We lost 23, Reed said. I came to see what saved yours. Caleb showed him the tunnel. Reed stood inside, breathing in the air like he didn't trust it. You stayed in here during the storm? Yes, sir. With them? Yes. Reed nodded slowly. Then this isn't just a building. It's a way of living. That sentence stayed with Caleb. A way of living. He had thought he was only saving horses. But now he saw what the others saw. He had changed how people thought about shelter, about wind, about land. Not with words, with dirt and patience. One evening, after helping Boone reinforce a roof beam, Caleb rode home under a sky the color of steel. The sun slid low and wide across the snow. Mrs. Doyle was waiting at his cabin with a pot of stew. "You eat like a bird lately," she said. "You can't hold up a town on an empty stomach." He smiled faintly and sat. She watched him quietly for a while. "Your father would have liked this." Caleb looked down. "I wish he could see it." She nodded. "I think he does." That night, the wind came again. Not violent, but steady. It brushed against the cabin and passed on. Caleb walked to the hill and stood at the tunnel entrance. Inside, the horses shifted, comfortable and calm. He remembered the first time he'd stood there alone, wondering if he was digging something foolish. Now he wondered something else. What would happen when winter ended? Would people forget? Would the hills be filled back in and the barns rebuilt the old way? He didn't know, but he knew this winter had marked them. When March finally came, it arrived quietly. Snow softened. The road reappeared. The creek cracked open with slow, careful sounds. People began leading their animals back into the open fields. They didn't tear down the earth shelters. They left them, like insurance against memory. One afternoon, the town gathered at the edge of the road where the storm had hit hardest. Someone had planted a wooden post there. On it, they carved simple words. "Winter taught us." The hill listened. Caleb didn't know who wrote it. He only knew that when he passed it, his chest tightened. By the end of the month, stories from other towns began drifting in. Cedar Ridge had started digging. A valley ranch built 2 earth stables. A farmer along the creek buried his chicken coop into the bank. People traveled to see Caleb's tunnel. Not to laugh. To measure. To understand. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a boy who had refused to forget what wind could do. One evening, Thomas Reed returned with 2 others. "We're building one up north," he said, "but the ground's rocky. Can you come look?" Caleb hesitated. Leaving his land felt strange. But he saddled Rusty and went. The ride took most of the day. The valley smelled of thawing grass and cold water. They showed him a hillside of stone and thin soil. He studied it carefully. "You'll have to go deeper," he said, "and angle it sharper. Let the rock hold the roof." They nodded, writing it down like it mattered. That was the moment he understood something else. What he had learned didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to anyone who listened. When he returned home, the sun was setting behind his hill. The tunnel entrance glowed faintly in the light. Caleb stood there a long time, thinking of the storm, of the town, of his father's voice and the wind's roar. Winter had taken much from him, but it had also given him something he hadn't expected, a way to stand against it. Not with force, with understanding. And as the snow melted into the earth he had trusted, Caleb knew that whatever storms came next year, the hills would remember, and so would the people. Spring didn't arrive with celebration. It came quietly, the way real change often does. Snow thinned into gray ribbons along the road. Fence posts reappeared like ghosts returning to the land. The creek broke open with a low, steady sound, as if the earth itself were stretching after a long sleep. Caleb Turner noticed it first in the horses. They walked farther from the hill each day, noses down in the new grass, legs strong again. Their coats shed in clumps, revealing healthy skin beneath. Alive. Still alive. That word meant more to him than it ever had before. One afternoon, Caleb stood on the slope above the tunnel and watched the town move again. Wagons rolled, children ran, smoke rose from chimneys without fear. The hills no longer looked empty. Dark cuts marked their sides. Earth shelters, dugouts, half-buried barns. Some were crooked, some were crude, but all of them faced away from the wind. Winter had not beaten the town. It had taught it. People still came to see Caleb, not in crowds anymore, just 1 or 2 at a time. They asked quieter questions now. How deep should we go? What if the ground floods? Can this work for cattle? Caleb answered patiently. You watch the land first. You let the slope choose the door. You don't fight the weather. You step aside. One day, Thomas Reed returned from the North Valley. We finished our, he said. Lost only 1 this winter. Last year, we lost 17. Caleb nodded slowly. I'm glad. Reed hesitated. They're calling it Turner Shelter up there. Caleb frowned. It's not mine. Reed smiled faintly. That's what everyone says about the things that matter. That night, Caleb walked into the tunnel alone. The chamber felt different without winter inside it. Drier, lighter. But the walls still held warmth from the ground. The beams still carried the weight of the hill. The shaft still breathed softly. He sat down where he had once slept beside his horses. He remembered the sound of the storm pounding overhead. He remembered believing the roof might fall. He remembered whispering to animals because there was no one else to hear him. And he remembered what it felt like to walk out and see them alive. Not because he was brave, but because he had paid attention. A week later, the town gathered near the old road where the blizzard had first struck. Someone had carved words into a wooden post and driven it into the thawing earth. We learned where to stand. Caleb didn't know who wrote it. He only knew it felt true. Mrs. Doyle stood beside him, leaning on her cane. "You changed things," she said. He shook his head. "Winter did." She looked at him. "You listened to it." That night, Caleb dreamed of his father again. This time, his father didn't speak. He only stood on the hill, hands in his coat pockets, watching the horses move across green grass. When Caleb woke, the dream stayed with him like a promise. By early summer, the town had returned to its routines. Fields were planted, roofs were rebuilt. Children stopped asking about the tunnel. But the hills kept their scars. And people didn't forget. They still turned their barns away from the north wind. They still dug deeper when storms were predicted. They still remembered the winter when a boy in a hill outlasted the storm. One evening, as the sun slid low and painted the prairie gold, Caleb sat on the fence rail and looked out over his land. 40 acres, 3 horses, 1 hill. Not much, but enough. He thought about how close he had come to giving up when the town laughed. How easy it would have been to build another wooden shelter and hope. How tempting it would have been to listen instead of think. The wind rose gently across the grass. No longer sharp, no longer cruel. Just whine. Caleb closed his eyes and let it pass. And that's where this story leaves him. Not as a hero with statues, not as a man with a fortune, but as a boy who chose to believe what the land showed him instead of what people told him. A boy who lost his father to winter and answered winter with understanding instead of fear. So now I want to ask you, if you had been in Caleb's place, would you have followed tradition or would you have trusted your own eyes? Would you have built another barn or would you have dug into the hill? Sometimes the ideas that save us don't look smart at first. They look strange. They look lonely. They look like mistakes until the storm comes. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about courage, about listening, or about standing your ground when others doubt you, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We share stories like this every week. Stories of survival, stories of quiet courage, stories about ordinary people who changed everything by refusing to give up. So tap subscribe, stay with us, and let's keep telling the stories that matter. Because somewhere out there, another storm is always on its way.